This episode of Review It is brought to you by Academic Pub, your book, your way. Visit them today at academicpub.com and follow them on Twitter at academic.pub.
Well, welcome. Today we're going to have a conversation with Charlie Osborne, a colleague of mine on ZDNet, and we just spoke on C12 as well about a great article she wrote on memorization and our general sort of focus on a lack of use of information and more still on the memorization of facts in the classroom and you know the long uphill battle we have to really sort that out. We also would like to take another step and look at another article that she's actually written. Again, from the Gen Y perspective, this whole Facebook password employer issue is sort of continued to spiral, and we see more and more employers asking potential employees for their Facebook passwords so they can really dig into their profiles, which strikes me as just an enormous invasion of privacy and is really troublesome. And yet, when we have students coming out of college or coming out of high school who are in a job market that generally stinks, what are you going to say? No? I would say no, but I have an established career and I can kind of pick and choose. How many millennials who are walking in the job market have that degree of choice? Charlie, I want to get your take on this, and would you give an employer your Facebook password?
Out of principle, I wouldn't. Although I'm saying that when the recession sort of first hit the media, I was out of work for about a year in England. In the end, I had to go abroad in order to get a job when I finally gave up on England. And at that point in time, when you're sending out 20, 30 resumes a day, you've got qualifications up to your elbows and you've worked for the last 10 years and you still can't get an interview to go and work in a supermarket, perhaps you would, or failing that, create a fake profile and use that instead. That was probably what I would do. But depending on how many people actually think of that road, who knows? Right.
So, do you feel like most millennials are going to be in the same sort of mindset? Hey, well, that's what I got to do to get a job, so here you go. And if so, we all know that the average 18, 19, 20-year-old is not terribly careful about what they put out there on Facebook, put online. What are the implications?
Well, the implications are very damaging, not only for the individual but the business itself. One thing that I do argue in my article is that if a business decides that it has the right to ask for a password for a potential employee, then not only are they, one, breaking Facebook's terms of service, but also, or one, that you wouldn't really want to know about your potential employee, where they went on Friday night, you don't want to see a picture of them being dragged out of a dumpster, all that kind of thing. If it doesn't have any reflection on how they are professionally, why do you care? But also, I think one of the longer term implications of this is that if a business is known for asking for employee passwords, then the Gen Y talent out there simply won't go for jobs with them. It's simple as that. I wouldn't. A lot of people I know wouldn't do it. It's degrading, I find. It's almost like reading a diary. Your employee says, right, I've got the right to find out who your friends are, to find out who your family are, to look at all your photos, to see what events you're going to go to see all the messages that you've sent. There might be some particularly embarrassing ones that in between, partners, friendships, whatever, things that you don't actually want seen by anyone, let alone your employer. Why do businesses think they have the right to do that? I think it's an absolute disgrace.
I agree, and it strikes me as really irrelevant. I don't turn over my phone records. I don't turn over video recordings of what I do in my house. Now, obviously, if someone has that, and this brings us to the next part of the conversation, I keep my profile pretty well locked down, and I have private conversations and private doings, and then there's things that I choose to share more broadly. But I kind of live, eat, and breathe this sort of stuff. Gen Y folks live, eat, and breathe it too, but they live, eat, and breathe it from a user perspective, not an analyst perspective. So how do we convince people to be much smarter about their digital footprint? So an employer obviously has the right to check out your profile if it's public and open. oh, what's this person doing? What are they sharing with the world? This is part of their personal brand, and that brand translates to a company. So that makes sense that they would check out, you're going to Google, potential employee. That seems quite reasonable. How do we help folks in this sort of, 17, 18, 19 to 25, even to 30-year-old range, be just a little more thoughtful about this?
Personally, I think that education systems, they do have an obligation to start teaching students about things like digital citizenship, about privacy online. I think my particular generation, I'm 24 years old, none of that was ever taught to us, so we sort of had to learn it off our own back. But the ones coming, behind us, they should be taught themselves, because it's a far more wide-ranging issue. Employers, they are going to look up potential employees online. When I worked in business, we looked up all of our interview applicants. Quite happy to admit that. We used to check them out and have a look, see what they've been up to. But the way to protect yourself is to either have very stringent privacy settings, or there's another method which I know a lot of people my age are doing, and I know quite a few personally who are doing it. Even though it's technically against terms of service, they're all changing their last name, so they can't be found. It's just another way that you kind of have to do it these days, really. Right. It's a difficult one, and a lot of it they have to learn off their own back. If they don't start thinking about their own privacy, they don't start thinking about the content that can be found online, because nothing's ever deleted, not truly. It's there, and if it's bad, people will find it. It can be dug up. So you just need to be very, very careful. There's a lot of things like when it comes to applications like Foursquare and you're letting people know where you are. Well, okay, that's great, but if someone's looking you up and decides, oh, fine, they're not in their house, then whose fault is it if you get burgled? You just have to start being a little bit more careful about what you put online. No one needs to know if you're hungover. No one needs to know if you're going to a gig tonight. You don't really have to put that on there.
Right. Well, Kirsten, from your perspective, you've been in the midst of the educational business and of seeing these companies who are doing their darndest to build brands that are young and vibrant and yet really have to work within the professionalism and the stodginess of the mainstream educational industry. Where does this all fit?
I would agree with what Charlie had just said. So you cannot imagine from somebody coming out of high school, maybe entering college, that it's simply there. So school, the services we maybe work with more in the startup field are of course a little bit different, but you cannot expect from somebody having an education or being fully aware of everything that happens. So I think it would generally be necessary and a good thing to have this sort of education. Otherwise, I do personally pretty much the same you do. I have a fairly, probably what people out there would call ultra-private personal profile on Facebook. Then I have my professional page everybody can see, and I'm happy to share also sometimes some personal information when I feel confident about sharing those. And then I have a restricted circle of friends, and they see those private pictures and my relationship when I want to share something about that. But I have to say, even with my personal profile, I somewhat lock it down. So some things I simply keep away from my virtual life, and I keep them for real life. Because, I mean, as you pointed, or both pointed out, you must be aware that nothing is really deleted, everything can appear, and I mean, even though sometimes violating terms of service, but for me, everything I once put on the internet is out there, and even though it might be private for the moment, but who knows how somebody might come and access this data one day. So for me, everything out there I'm confident with, and that's okay. But as you said, Chris, we are both working in this field, and we are probably very aware, as it's part of our everyday lives. If somebody older or younger, maybe not so much like always a question of only Gen Y, Gen X, but if some people are simply not that familiar with how things work with employers or sharing stuff on the internet, and as Charlie pointed out, the social pressure, I can definitely imagine some people tempted to giving private information, what I would never do. So I would either refer to my professional page, or say, of course you can make a Google search or whatever search. So there's enough stuff out there about me to give you a more or less precise picture, and the rest is simply private. As it's not only information about me, but also about my friends, and that's nothing a person not privately related to me should access or should have access to.
Yeah, I think the couple of take-home messages for Gen Y is one, be strong. Yeah, the job market will recover, and there are things to be done, and there is a principle here at stake, and there's terms of service and legalities at stake. There's also, as you pointed out, this isn't just you. This is now your friends that you're using to apply to this job, and that's something to which they've consented. The other piece, of course, is that nothing is ever really private. And if you don't absolutely want someday for a friend who's no longer a friend to download that picture that you privately shared, no matter how deep your privacy settings are, to have that appear blasted all over the internet somewhere, I can only imagine what the presidential elections here in the States will look like in 20 years, when all of Gen Y has all of their 20 years of 30, 40 years of digital footprints scavenged and put forth in the media in very public ways. When Barack Obama was elected, and it turned out that he shared in his book that he did use substances and made mistakes as a young man, and he was public about that in an educational sense. But imagine all those things that we did and were stupid enough to post on Facebook just with our friends. They're going to turn up, and there will be some point when this is this is a big deal. We teach. I think we do a pretty decent job of teaching most people that, hey, email is just like a public letter. It's a memo. Don't put something into an email that you would not want publicly shared or archived or used. And we haven't shifted that message now to social media, which obviously is far more relevant for this entire generation than email is. So, Charlie, great perspectives, great articles, and definitely we'll post a link to iGeneration over on ZDNet. Really appreciate you taking some time with us to chat about this issue that is just increasingly critical for both our teachers who need to be educating on this and for our students who are getting hammered by it.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, guys.